Welcome to the Brattleboro Literary Festival. If you're literary, you're in for a beautiful ride. I'm so glad you're here for a hit of the artistic during one of the weirdest times in history. I love the title of this event with Julia and Peter. It's called Frozen Landscapes, and I feel like it's a metaphor for a lot right now. And these two authors, Julia Phillips and Peter Geye, they really show us so beautifully in their books, Northernmost and Disappearing Earth, how our personal landscapes interplay with the physical landscape in a kind of infinity symbol of dramatic influence. I read both of their books in sort of a page turning flurry of a matter of days, both for the beauty of the language and the brilliance of the craft, but also as a way to sort of make sense of what we're inside of right now, metaphorically and symbolically. So I highly, highly recommend them. Julia and Peter, so happy to have you here. I'm going to go away while you guys give us a little talk, a little brilliant talk of two geniuses in the literary world, just going at it and talking about whatever rises for you guys. And if you want to read, we'd love to hear some of your work. And otherwise, just do whatever comes intuitively, and we'll come back and answer questions in the chat when you guys are ready. So have a blast. We can't wait to witness this.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Hi, Julia.
Hi, Peter.
It's such a pleasure and an honor to have a chance to talk with you today. I think that Disappearing Earth is just a brilliant book, and change is one of the few books that I can think of that's changed the way I think about how novels can be written, and I'm really excited to talk to you about it.
That leaves me pretty speechless. I want everyone on the call to know that Peter has been the most kind and generous through all the lead up to this event, which is wild when someone who's a towering literary figure, I would say, like an established author who really knows the game, to be that kind to a debut. It means everything to me, Peter. So I'm really, really, really excited to be talking to you and to get to say to you, not just over email, how grateful and thrilled I am.
Oh, that's kind of you. I thought we didn't talk much about what we were going to do today, but I thought in my own best interest, I just want to have a conversation with you. And I think that we settled on it. So if it's okay with you, I'm just going to ask a question, and then we'll just chat away the hour. So I'm mindful of wanting to have a conversation with you that you haven't had yet. And I don't know if that's possible given all the conversations that you've had about this book, I'm sure. But rather than beginning where it might seem obvious, I mean, if you look at our two books, and I have them here,
I love it so much.
They're like siblings, right? Like they're definitely, well, from the same publishing house, yes, but also it seems in so many ways. In fact, I didn't notice that. That could be the very same.
Oh my God, the font. Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
And they're both set in these places, right, that are cold and snowy and frozen and remote. And there's lots to talk about there. And that is the title of today's conversation. But I would rather begin somewhere else, and I hope it's okay. And I mentioned, just as we started, that, your book, it really realigned some of the ways that I think about how novels can work. And for those very few people who haven't read Disappearing Earth yet, it begins with in a way that's kind of seems almost like a mystery novel, right? It's not giving too much away to say that two young girls, get into a car and disappear, and that's the impetus for the novel. And though they certainly and kind of beautifully haunt every section of the story, what happens next is that we move away from them in any sort of direct way and into the lives of several different characters in this foreign landscape, foreign to American readers landscape. And the narrative effect of that is that we have it at the outset, this incident which terrifies us and which grips us and which gets our mind, going in 100 different directions, and then you redirect, and all of a sudden we're learning about other characters with other problems and other troubles and other happinesses and all of the things that come along. And like I said, the girl's disappearance haunt us, but it's not the story. I mean, it touches on it, but it's not the main story. In fact, there are, like, I don't know, it must be 10 other stories essentially that happen before we come back to the girls and their fate at the end of the story, which I will not give away. But the effect of that, I remember the first time I read it, I was at once sort of disoriented, which I can't imagine isn't a part of the plan, but also just compelled along by these other stories that are happening. And I wonder if you can just talk about how you came up with this narrative technique, because it's totally fresh in my experience.
This makes me really happy, and I want to put it, I'm so glad you brought up covers, because I want to ask you about covers, and I'm so glad that you brought up structure, because I want to ask you about structure in your books. It's like you so neatly and brilliantly match and balance different stories in a single text, and I really want to ask you how you do that, and how we can all learn to do it. I told Peter before, to folks out there in Zoom land, I told Peter before this started that I'm really determined by the end of this to learn how to write a novel from him. So that's my hope for the hour together. I wanted to, it means so much to me that you say that about the book. Working with the structure in that way was one of the most exciting things about the book to me, and it was sort of the designing principle of the work before I started this manuscript that became Disappearing Earth. I'd worked on a different manuscript for a long time that was kind of foggy and never really came together. And the way I had started that project was, I was like, I'm just going to get into it and see what happens, and kind of wander around and in the text and work on it for a while, and a story and a structure will emerge. And they never did for me. I think, I know that for many other people they do. For me, they did not. And so by the time I finished that project, I thought, well, when I start the next one, I really want to know from the start, I want to make some structural decisions about what I'm doing, and some story decisions. I want to be able to, have the plot in the sentence. I want to be able to sort of map out who the characters are and how they're related to each other, so that I don't spend another 7 years like wandering in the woods of this writing process. And again, I'm very impressed with people who are able to do that. I wanted to be able to do that, and I was not for this. So one of the decisions I made was about this structure with these many different, that each chapter would have a different focus character, and they would just sort of be related to each other in a web or in a spiral of connection. The reason I wanted to do that, I think there are many reasons. One is I thought I was intimidated by the novel form, and I thought, well, if I chunk it out, maybe I can approach it with less trepidation. I really wanted to write a novel, but I didn't know how. And so I tried to do that. And it ended up being both harder and easier as always. I also wanted to, I began this book because I was really engaged with the setting. I decided on the setting before I decided on anything else about it. And so I wanted to cover as much ground literally as possible. I wanted to have as many different characters and experiences and settings within this peninsula where the book is set as possible. And the structure helped me do that. But also because I wanted to write, as you say, a kind of a mystery, like a thriller about disappearing girls. That is a story that always compelled me and still compels me. Sort of true crime stories or this narrative of this, lost girl and what's going to happen, even fairy tales when I was little, reading about these princesses who were endangered, that was very exciting to me. But after a while, they layer over each other, and they feel like you've heard the story over and over again, and it's hard to find what is new. And so in this structure, I wanted to break away from a focus on a victim and a perpetrator and a detective, a brilliant detective who solves it. And I wanted to look at a community of people who help the crime happen, either some of them out of conscious decision, but many of them out of unconscious decision or bias or prejudice, or choosing to look past their neighbors or not pay attention to what's going on. And who can also, in the same way, come together to address what has happened and to sort of heal as a community. That to me seemed more interesting as a writer, and also more resonant as a person than such a tightly focused narrative around, just one bad person who decides to do a terrible thing for no reason, and we have no idea, but we follow them very closely.
Well, that's super interesting. One of the effects of that is that along the way, there are, like I said, I didn't do the math, but I think there must be 10, right? Because the first chapter is the girls, and the last chapter is the girls, and then there's 12 months, so 10. That's my math. Those are my math skills coming through. But it gives the story, and you, the author, then a chance to tell these several other stories that are happening along the way, and some of them sort of linger. Some of them you pull us in through the beauty of the writing and the tension in the story. I'm especially reminded, I had to write names down because of the Russian names, of course, but Oksana's missing dog, that chapter, I was just like, it's its own little mystery inside the bigger mystery. But that story, the story of her dog, we just have to presume that story doesn't resolve. So there are these shorter stories that make up the whole story, and many of them don't have those tidy resolutions. And I must say that I remember the first time I was reading it, I was like, no, you can't not tell us what happens with the girl. Like, it can't be at the end. We can't not have that. But the second time I read it, I was like, I think it could have been brilliant either way. It could have been brilliant with the resolution or without. I think that's such a testament to the storytelling that's happening in the rest of the book. It's just sensational.
That's so kind, Peter. That makes me really happy, and shows, that just blows me away. What a joy it is to get to write something and then put it in the world and have other people enter that world with you. I will say that the chapter with the missing dog has been the source of the most angry emails and 1-star Goodreads reviews. A lot of people emailed me to let me know that they were not at all happy that we don't know whether the dog is found or not.
That's because so many people care more about dogs than they do about
I'm never gonna put an endangered dog ever again in a book. I've really learned my lesson from that. But I'm really curious about how, now, am I right that all 4 of your books have this sort of, I really feel that this is an opportunity to talk to a master about how to write, and I'm very, very excited about it. All 4 of your books have a sort of mirrored, a dual narrative, right? Two narratives taking place in different times. And I wonder what draws you to that sort of braided effect, and how you push it and refine it. And I know you said Northernmost is the book that you work the hardest on and the book that you're most proud of. I'm correct me, I'm totally, what's the word? Paraphrasing there. Yeah. But I'm really curious about this form and this structure and what it gives to you as a writer, and how it feeds you. Yeah,
it's a beguiling question even for me. And so Northernmost is the 4th novel that I published. I wrote a couple novels when I was younger that still sit in a box somewhere, so they don't count. But even those stories had this non-linear and dual storytelling mode. And I'm not sure where the instinct comes from. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, writers make choices that they're not aware of, that they can only think about afterwards. In the way that we dream up our settings and our plots and our characters and anything else that we have to dream up, so too comes this form. This has at least been the case with me. One that I wasn't even aware of until after my second book was published, when someone said, well, this does a similar thing. And they all function differently. All of the books function differently with respect to this.
Absolutely.
But I remember someone asked me once, why in The Lighthouse Road, which was my second book, why does the story go back and forth? And I was like, well, that's just how I thought to tell the story. And I was trying to articulate an answer. Over the years, I've come to, and what I said in that moment was, well, a story, the story of our lives, the way we live our lives, and how we talk to ourselves and the people that we know and love about our lives is not linear.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't just about one thing. If we're upset about politics, we might also be upset about the fact that we burned dinner, and those two things can be equally compelling in the hands of the right writer. And when you wake up in the morning and you say, okay, today is Saturday, I've got the chance to talk to Julia at 11, and I've got this to do later, and then I remember last night, and the world is just this, like, it's like the blowing leaves of our lives, right? The stories are all over the place. And for someone like me whose life is not only writing stories, but also mostly just reading them and existing in them, that's how I view the world. And so it seems like a natural place to tell stories from, where there are multiple points of view, and there are multiple timelines, because what happens today is affected by what happened a week ago and a year ago and 20 years ago, or much longer than that if you're as old as I am. And so that's just how I see the world and experience the world. And I think that's the answer to why these stories happen the way that they do. I just finished writing another book, and
Oh my God, you're incredible.
well, it's been, I had a long time with Northernmost to sit around waiting for it to come out. But it's the exact same thing. And I was, of course I realize what I'm doing, but it's almost like it's accidental, or it happens subconsciously, the way the story takes form. And to talk about it in an intelligent way requires like reflection. Like if you asked me at the beginning, why are you doing this? I'd say, I have no idea. I have no idea that's how it's coming out on the page, which is so funny to think that we might be able to have a conversation wherein we talk about how novels happen. And they're like, well, it's just this simple. And these are the ways that it happens. It of course doesn't happen that way. So it's, to the aspiring writers in the group, I suppose it's not a very satisfactory answer. What I would say as a teacher is that if you don't know at first, you damn well ought to know by the end why you've made the choices that you have, if not to be able to talk about them intelligently, but because you have to understand everything about your book. And for me, that's what I mean about that reflection. Like, oh, now I see why I needed this and what needed to happen and why that facilitated this and that and the other thing. And that's as close as I come to an answer on that sort of question. What did you want to ask about the covers? What were you going to say about the
Well,
cover?
I wanted to tell you that your cover for Wintering, I was like on my mood board of covers for Disappearing Earth, and I think it's so gorgeous and beautiful. And it really, I was like sending it to the team over at Knopf because I thought it was so cool. They said, yeah, we've seen this before.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's so gorgeous.
Are you happy with yours?
Yeah, I'm very, I love both of the covers, but the way I feel about the hardcover is, which you have there and which showed very kindly, because I think it was my first experience ever going through publication and getting to have this dream come true of having a cover when I had fantasized about it so many other, and looked at covers of other people's books and said, there's the perfect thing. It just blew me. I mean, I want to like wallpaper my entire life in that cover. I think it's so exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
I agree. I remember not knowing much about it. I mean, I try to stay abreast of
yeah,
what's happening in the world of books, but seeing it on the shelf and just going to it and picking it up and knowing I was going to buy it without even looking at
it's
what happens
it's
inside.
that northern, it's those wintry. You were
Yeah.
probably seeing your own book hidden inside it. I think you were probably seeing the inspiration from your books that I'd sent to the designers. I wanted to ask you too. I was thinking about, as you were just saying that, I was thinking of how true it is that um, we don't know what we're doing until the end, and certainly you better know by the end. You better be able to talk about it and make that narrative for yourself out of the reasons you did what you did. And I was thinking about, I hope this isn't, by the way, I hope this isn't too inside baseball for folks. To me, the process of publication and the book getting out into the world is very fascinating because it has certainly taught me a lot recently, and it's a joy in a situation like this to get to, we come to a festival like this, even virtually, to get to talk to the people who created the objects that are on our shelves. And that process from you writing your work in Minneapolis to it being here on my shelf in Brooklyn is very thrilling to me. Because of that, I think about that for me, I realize when I talk about the book or the decisions that I made or what I did, that the end of that process, I'm best able to talk about that. I've learned about the Disappearing Earth after the book has come out into the world, that the end of it was actually not when I finished writing it, but after going through the editorial process and after getting to talk with readers and understand how they received it. And I keep on refining and better understanding, or maybe even making up my own answers for the decisions I made and why I made them. Like the structural decision I made, I don't remember now. I started this book in 2009, and I don't exactly remember now why I made the choices I did. But I think that it's what I told you before.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you said you had to wait a while for Northernmost to come out, and I wonder what that was like. How you feel. Do you feel that you understand your book when you come to the end of the writing in a different way than you do when you come to its being out in the world, or that you understand your text? What was it like to have Northernmost sort of stretched out?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question about whether you understand it better when you finish it or once people have engaged with it. And so there's two questions there, it seems to me, and the answer is to that question about readers, like unequivocally yes, and absolutely yes, because and though okay, so I finished Northernmost, and I have my apprehensions and my misgivings, whatever they might be, because we're writers and we try to be as close to perfect as we can be, knowing that we can't ever get anywhere even approximately near it. And but still excited to share it, and still excited for people to read it, and certainly with an understanding of what we have endeavored to do. That doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. What matters is that someone in Vermont or anywhere else picks up a copy of that book and reads it and has their reaction to it. That's what the transaction it is always headed toward, in an ideal world where you're lucky enough to publish your books. And so without the reaction of, and of course we don't know all of the reactions, we have access to some of them via conversations that we have with readers, or what people write on Goodreads, or anything else. But that's why it exists. That's what, it's not for us. Of course we're excited and happy about it, because it's a sort of dream come true, to do this for a living. But we're not satisfying ourselves, or even our editors, or our publishers, or the people who work on behalf of the book. We're doing it for the readers, which is of course true. And it's so easy to lose track of that in the grind of writing and publishing, and editing and publishing and promoting a book. It's easy to lose sight of that. But I mean, that's of course why we do it. That's of course what the object is. And with Northernmost, it was so strange, because many things happened along the way that were unique to the experience of this book. I sold it based on just a partial, so I had to finish writing the book.
So
And
when
then
was that?
that was, I signed the contract for it on my birthday, which is in April, and 2018. So
okay.
I finished
Yeah.
writing it by the end of 2018.
Oh my God, you blew me away.
Is
This
that
blows
right,
me away.
or is it
That feels like yesterday.
17? I can't even remember.
Yes.
Maybe it was 17. I think it was
So you
18.
finished
I
writing
don't know.
it that year.
Finished writing it, yeah.
Yeah.
And then went through the process of editing it.
Yeah.
And then, in 2018. So by the spring of 2018, so it was 2017. I'm sorry that I sold it. So 2018, finished editing it. My editor, then my editor was no longer on the job, on the project. So I went through a series of working with other people.
Oh, so you went through edits with multiple editors.
I went through edits with, I mean, it was mostly done being edited. And then there was a period where Sonny, rest in peace, was on the job, and he finalized the cover. And then
the head of Knopf, the former.
Yeah. And then Tim O'Connell, who's now my editor, took over. And we did a few minor things, but not really, not that much. But, so it's had this, it's unlike previous experiences where it's a very cut and dried, and that, my former editor was Gary Fisketjon, and Gary was like, here's the deal, and this is what we're going to do, and and then on to publication, and this is how it looks. It's been this, and in so many ways it mirrors the world that we live in now, where nothing is normal, right? The experience just hasn't been normal. Even the promotion of it, sitting here staring at, now luckily there's another person with me, but so often these events are alone, and the only thing you see is your mug staring back at you. And it seems like the most self-indulgent thing. Of course there are people in the audience, but you don't see them. We were talking about this before we got on. How has it been different for you? I mean, so you had a whole year of doing live and in-person events, or maybe not a whole year, but most of a year.
Most of a year. So my book came out in May 2019, and I was really lucky to be able to go on tour with it, and to, obviously all of that was like, I was pinching myself every day. And then I was lucky to go to festivals in the fall. This was everything I'd ever dreamed of. And then I had very intense plan, not only to be in Vermont right now, but my paperback was coming out in April. So I had a paperback tour planned, and the world just stopped spinning in some ways. I was actually thinking about it this morning, and thinking about how impossible it was for me to imagine this life. And now it seems so normal. Being at home all the time, and everything is through Zoom, and not, my social life. I will say also though, Peter, like, to be honest, my conception of it is quite strange, because I had my first baby in June. So I didn't know that. He's taking a walk right now with his dad. So because of that, the lockdown coincided with just getting into, I was kind of midway through at the end of my second trimester, and then I had a baby the end of June, and so really it feels like having traveled to a whole other planet or something. It just, the whole world seems different than how it seemed before.
Yeah. Holy cow, that's so interesting. I mean, you wouldn't be going anywhere anyway because you have a newborn baby.
I don't know. I mean, I'm seeing kids' pictures behind you. I imagine you've been through this a few times. I don't know how naive you were when you were a first-time parent. I was like, okay, so I'm going to be coming back from New Zealand mid-May. It'll be my 34th week the day after. And then, by this, we were like, we're going to be going to Spain in September. We're going to be, we had all these huge plans, which I don't think, pandemic or not, I don't think they probably would have come to pass, but it really is wild.
So that's so interesting, and congratulations. That's such a beautiful story.
Well, it's just strange. So what a strange year.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it's totally different, but also not dissimilar to bring a book out and have a child at the same time. Oh,
Oh,
here's Suzanne.
hi. Oh, you're on mute. You're muted. Oh no.
Hi. I still want you to finish talking, Peter, because I think this experience of having kids and trying to be artistic at all and get your work out there is really interesting. So yeah,
Yeah.
just keep.
Yeah,
I was
Peter,
just
I really want to hear how you do it.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I remember, and my kids are older now. I mean, my oldest is a sophomore in high school, which means he'll wake up when he's, like at 2:00 this afternoon or something. I envy him so much. We like pass in the at 5:00 in the morning. But I remember when I was I started writing my first book well before I had kids, and it took forever. It also took me 10 years to from the first thought to publication, and in that time I had kids. So by the time that book came out, I was working on my second book, and anything that I thought I knew, like that I needed silence, I needed my desk, I needed coffee, I needed my pens in a certain order, all of that was just like, get real, man. And for the last 10 years, I've been writing, like half the time I'm writing with a kid climbing on my back, while I'm at soccer practice, jotting notes. But there's something, and I don't want to overstate it, but there's something that, well, it's more rewarding, of course, because your audience crystallizes. At least it did for me. Like, okay, now I know who my audience is in an abstract sort of way. It's my children, right?
Yes.
That's who I am writing to impress. That's who I want to understand me and understand how I see the world through these books and that sort of thing. But also, like, and they're a long way from being impressed now, but that's because they're smart aleck kids. When they're older, hopefully they will be impressed, and hopefully they will know me better as a consequence of writing these books. And I'm sure the same thoughts have gone through your mind about, like, the purpose is suddenly much larger.
Emma Straub, the novelist Emma Straub and bookstore owner Emma Straub, who's so brilliant. She just wrote, I've been thinking about it a lot, and what you're saying is so exactly right. That she said her dad is a writer, and she was saying her dad has been in the hospital a lot of this year, and on Twitter she was writing this.
Yeah, I saw that.
But that she goes to his books to find his voice over and over again, and because of his books, he is she's always in conversation with him, and to think about that preservation of a voice is extraordinary. That's a gift that you're giving your kids.
Yeah. Well, another thing that's true, I think, is that it puts a pressure on you, a good kind of pressure, to not. I mean, we're always trying to not screw up as novelists, but to be honest, and to not just consider in abstract or theoretical ways how we're doing might be received, but really, like, we're people trying to represent and create other people, and there's a huge responsibility in that.
I've been thinking too about I wish that we were all in person together so we could just ramble on and go to, like, spend the whole festival. I want to hear everything that you have to say about parenting and art making. One thing I've been thinking about a lot lately is in fiction writing is that fiction, as any writing, but fiction especially as an exercise of imagination and inhabiting, empathetically imagining and inhabiting another person. And there are lots of things that I didn't realize I wasn't imagining until my son was born. And suddenly I react differently, or am able to put myself better in other people's shoes in certain situations. And that shocked me because I didn't understand that I had been that my skills were not sharpened enough before enough. And they keep sharpening now. It's really interesting.
I had literally the exact same experience when my kids were born. I don't remember. I mean, I wrote this in one book. I don't remember what, but it's a line from my own consciousness, which was like, the children, they do all sorts of things to you. But one of the things that I discovered sort of emphatically and beautifully was that they teach you how to love in a way that you didn't know you could ever love before. And I don't know that that's true for everyone. Certainly it was true for me, and it's true of most of the people that I know. But I think that's what you're talking about, or that's how I understood it when it happened to me. Like it was a craft thing where writing is concerned. It's like, no, that's not right. You have to go into that character's consciousness and their morality and their intelligence and make the decision based on that, like you do when a child is screaming and you haven't been to sleep for 24 hours. That's it's the same sort of experience, or the same sort of requirement is being asked of you.
This is making me weepy.
Yeah.
Can you guys pull your books up again just to show the audience? Because someone in the audience said they wanted to see them again.
I got my paperback here.
Oh, you have your paperback. I don't know.
Peter's the best.
That's awesome, Peter. Thank you. Yeah, somebody just wanted to see them again, probably. I have your hardcover, Julia, but I haven't seen the paperback yet.
It's so weird. They're almost twins.
Yeah, our books. Yeah, they are 100%.
They're the exact same size. They have this, a similar thickness, the same font on the spine, the same cover.
That makes me really happy.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like when you say about the audience, Peter, and you're talking about your kids, when you think about your global audience, both of you, who do you think is reading you mostly? Like, who are your demographics in terms of readership? Do you know? Are you getting feedback in that way? Is it all over the place? Like, who are you hearing from, and who's buying the books? And
I mean, I don't know very much about. I know what my understanding of my demographics come from standing in front of an audience and saying, "This is who's here, and this is who wants to talk to me about the book." So it's, I mean, it's a lot of women. Women read way more fiction than men do. I mean, I don't really know what to say beyond that. Except that I'm not hip to it. You maybe you're savvier than I am, Julia. No more.
Not at all. Not at all. It's interesting. It's a really interesting question, I think, because I've already revealed that I'm very interested in the publication process. I'm really interested in the editing process and how a book gets out into the world and marketing and design. I don't know anything about audience at all. And it's hard for me to hold in my head the idea of somebody else. Peter, hopefully you're a little more accustomed to this or have gotten better at it, but I still feel when someone says that they've read the book that they're faking, or that they're just telling me a nice thing. It just doesn't seem possible that a document on my computer has been read by other people. And so I have every single time, I'm always shocked. Whoever the person is that says that they've read it, no matter their background or where they're from, I'm just like, how did you get your hands on it? I don't understand.
Yeah, never mind that it's available anywhere you can buy books. Yeah.
It just doesn't seem real.
Although your readership for both of you is very large. I mean, if you look at how many people have read you, it's huge. I mean, the reviewers and what's fascinating about your answer is that I think there's a lot of questions right now. Who's your audience? You have to know your audience before you write. And what I'm hearing when you're talking about process is much more internal than that, is much more kind of, you're talking about the spiral and like sort of the landscape and this, and Peter saying, I don't even know how I would actually talk about how that idea came to go from different points of view. And so it's sort of, I think it's a relief you know, that you guys are saying, like, that's not what's primary. And we're not thinking of audience and creating from there. We're actually creating from something that's much more organic. And
That reminds me, here's my wild writing theory. This is my wild art making theory, that when I'm when writing is going the best for me, this is how I think of it. And I started that I imagine, this is really bananas. I imagine that I'm this old man craftsman is how I imagine. And I go down to my basement workshop and I'm carving wooden squirrels. This is how I imagine it. Why these images? I do not know. I live in an apartment. I have no basement. I have no
no chisels.
No chisels, not a single one. I've never whittled anything, but I'm carving wooden squirrels, and it's a weird thing to do, and I don't know why I want to do it, and it gives me joy. And sometimes people say, hey, are you going to come out and do this thing? And I say, no, I can't. I'm working on my squirrel carving. And they say, why are you doing that? Because it's bizarre. And sometimes the squirrels look terrible, and I keep on working them, and they get better and better and better. And sometimes, maybe somehow they'll meet like a carved squirrel aficionado who is obsessed with my wooden carved squirrel. But even that person will never put in the time, no matter how, their experience of it will be so different from my experience of it, spending decades every day in my basement workshop carving squirrels. It's so profoundly strange. And yet there's such a joy and purity in that, in making the particular and little and lovely thing that you want to make, even when you're not very good at it, and even when it wastes a lot of your time, it's also beautiful. And I think when I try to think of, I think that's my best writing self, where it feels so private. I don't know if you carve squirrels at all, Peter.
It just happened to be a master squirrel carver.
Master squirrel carver?
No, but that's such a beautiful description of it. And of course it's sort of strange and silly, but of course it has to be if you're going to endeavor to do what we do. I will say this about the question about audience and the question about readership, and I guess it's sort of addressing the larger question of why we endeavor to do this in the first place. And so I'll just say plainly that I've been discouraged by publishing a book during COVID times. And it's been an experience unlike any previous experience, just by miles and miles and miles. And it's been depressing in a lot of ways. And I have been, it has caused me to ask myself questions about why I keep going into the basement to carve the squirrel, which, thank you. Now that will forever be my point of reference for this. And even thought like, well, I have to do something more reasonable than this. I have to go get a real job, and I have to get my life on track, basically. But as soon as that prospect enters my mind, and the world may someday require that I actually do go get a real job and be responsible. But as soon as that prospect enters my mind, the thing that I miss is not publishing the book, although that's terrific. It's writing the book and imagining the lives and having having available to me this alternative reality that I spend all my time with, the carving of the squirrel in the basement.
Yeah.
And the thought of living without that, like, you might as well be asking me to live without one of these guys. It just can't happen. I can't function without that, that experience, that almost daily experience of being with these characters that we create. In the same way that I could never, if someone said, okay, you can't read anymore, I would say, well, that's just impossible. And writing is just an amplification of reading.
Makes me so happy to hear. Of course, like what a devastating time this is, but if just to know we have the ability to access in ourselves private worlds, imaginary worlds that give us joy, even in times that are so hard, it makes me love being human and grateful to be alive.
Yeah.
You two are like incredibly inspiring. I mean, that the squirrel image there, you know why it works is because it's ostensibly silly, but then if you really go into it, it's like a legend or something. I remember Amy Hempel saying once that you know, she writes and she writes and she writes, and then one day she looks at the work and there are crop circles. You know, there are like just patterns in there that make sense finally. And like if the patience is like, could I wait long enough for those to rise, you know? So
Beautiful.
thank you guys so much. I think we have till only 12, right?
I don't.
More, Julia? Did you want to say? Oh,
No,
12:10.
12:10. No, I was just waving sadly.
Oh, you're waving sadly. So I'm going to tell you that Anne Latches wrote to say to, I guess, Julia, but I think you too, Peter. Count me in on your demographic. 63-year-old woman, middle income, Vermont native, drawn to setting, winter, darkness,
Oh,
late.
this is us, Peter. This is our moment.
Read a
Yeah.
review when choosing a book club book and right away reserved a copy at the library. Terrific read. Looking forward to Peter's books too. And then someone else said they read the book in book club and loved it so much. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's funny when they say like, you know, that's sort of disparaging things about the novel. And then to read both of these books, it really brings back that there's no way this form is going anywhere because it isn't about all the surface skating. It's about the depth of the human experience and the tenacity of the human experience and the fact that like things happen. I love that you always start with an about, you know, Peter in your books and also Julia in Disappearing. There's an about. It isn't just sort of moving language on the page. There's an about, there's a story, and that story builds. And, you know, even though there's gorgeous craft in there and it just is arresting in what you're doing with the, you know, the literary, it's also a story, you know, where you just keep wanting to move the pages no matter who you are. So I just am like really so grateful to both of you for coming to the literary festival. And yeah, I'm sure our paths will cross again, but thank you.
I hope so in person.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, both of you.
Peter, thank you so much.
Yeah.
See you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.